There are 6 cases from BuzzFeed Unsolved, which have now either been fully or significantly solved. Our first case takes us back to the 1970s and 1980s, when a shadowy figure terrorized the state of California. Known as the Golden State Killer, this predator was responsible for at least 13 murders, over 50 rapes, and more than 100 burglaries. His reign of terror stretched across multiple counties, and despite the best efforts of law enforcement, the case went cold. The Golden State Killer's methods were chilling. He would stalk his victims, learning their routines before breaking into their homes in the dead of night. He often tied up the men and sexually assaulted the women, haunting his victims and law enforcement alike. BuzzFeed Unsolved covered this case, highlighting the sheer fear that gripped California during this time. But for decades, the identity of this monster remained a mystery. That all changed in 2018. Through the groundbreaking use of genetic genealogy, investigators were able to link DNA from the crime scenes to a family tree. This eventually led them to Joseph James D'Angelo, former police officer living a quiet life in the suburbs. D'Angelo was arrested and later confessed to the crimes, bringing long-awaited justice to the victims and their family. The Golden State Killer case, once a terrifying mystery, is now a closed chapter in criminal history. Next, we delve into the case of the Zodiac Killer, one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. Operating in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the Zodiac Killer claimed to have killed 37 people, though only 5 confirmed victims were linked to him. What set the Zodiac apart was his taunting letters sent to the press, filled with cryptic ciphers and disturbing details of his crimes. BuzzFeed Unsolved brought renewed attention to this case, exploring the chilling possibility that the killer might still be out there. For years, law enforcement and amateur sleuths alike tried to crack the Zodiac's codes and uncover his identity, but the case grew cold. Then in 2021, a group of independent investigators known as the Casebreakers made headlines when they claimed to have identified the Zodiac Killer as Gary Francis Posty, a former Air Force veteran. According to their findings, clues hidden in the Zodiac's ciphers and evidence from Posty's life pointed directly to him. While the FBI has not officially closed the case, the identification of Posty has brought a sense of closure to many who followed this terrifying mystery. Whether this will stand the test of time or remain controversial, one thing is certain: the Zodiac Killer's shadow over Northern California has finally started to lift. Our third case is one that haunted the city of Philadelphia for over 60 years. Tragic story of the boy in the box. In February 1957, the body of a young boy, estimated to be between 3 and 7 years old, was found in a cardboard box in a wooded area of Philadelphia. The boy had been severely beaten, and despite an extensive investigation, his identity remained a mystery. This heartbreaking case was featured on BuzzFeed Unsolved, where the hosts discussed the various theories about who the boy might have been and how he ended up in such a tragic situation. For decades, the boy in the box remained one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries. However, in 2022, thanks to advancements in DNA technology and the relentless efforts of investigators, the boy was finally identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Using genealogical DNA, investigators were able to trace his ancestry and uncover his name. While many questions remain, such as who was responsible for his death, knowing his identity has brought a long-awaited sense of resolution to a case that had been cold far too long. Joseph Augustus Zarelli can now rest in peace, with his name finally known to the world. Our fourth case is one that shook the nation and forever changed the way we respond to missing children. On May 25, 1979, 6-year-old Etan Patz disappeared while walking to his school bus stop in New York City. It was the first time he had been allowed to make the trip alone. He never made it to school. His disappearance led to one of the largest missing child searches in U.S. history and marked the beginning of a new era in child safety awareness. For years, his face became synonymous with the missing children's movement, appearing on milk cartons across America. Despite countless leads and suspects, the case went unsolved for decades. In 2017, a resolution was finally reached when Pedro Hernandez, former convenience store worker, was convicted of Etan's murder. Hernandez had confessed to luring Etan into the store's basement and killing him, though no physical evidence ever linked him to the crime. His conviction brought legal closure to the case, but for many, questions still linger about the true circumstances of Etan's disappearance. Nevertheless, the case of Etan Patz is now considered solved, marking the end of a decades-long mystery that haunted New York City and the nation. Our fifth case is the mysterious disappearance of Tara Calico, a young woman who vanished while riding her bike in New Mexico in 1988. Tara's case baffled investigators for years, and it was featured on BuzzFeed Unsolved, where viewers were left with more questions than answers. The case became even more eerie when a Polaroid photograph was found in Florida, showing a girl who resembled Tara, bound and gagged in the back of a van. While the photo raised suspicions, no solid leads came from it, and Tara's whereabouts remained unknown for decades. However, in 2021, a significant development occurred. Authorities announced that they had identified 2 men who were responsible for Tara's disappearance. According to the investigation, these men, who were teenagers at the time, accidentally hit Tara with their vehicle and in a panic abducted and murdered her to cover up their crime. Although both suspects are now deceased, the identification of these individuals has brought some closure to Tara's family and those who have followed the case for years. While her body has yet to be recovered, the mystery of what happened to Tara Calico is finally coming to light. Our final case is one that gained widespread attention not just through BuzzFeed Unsolved, but also through the groundbreaking serial podcast, The Murder of Hae Min Lee. In 1999, Hae Min Lee, a high school student in Baltimore, was found strangled to death in a park. Her ex-boyfriend, Adnan Syed, was arrested and convicted of her murder, but questions about his guilt have persisted for years. BuzzFeed Unsolved explored the many inconsistencies in the case, from unreliable witness testimonies to possible mishandling of evidence. For years, the case remained controversial, with many believing that Adnan was wrongfully convicted. In 2022, after serving more than 2 decades in prison, Adnan Syed was released after new DNA testing failed to link him to the crime scene. While his release does not conclusively solve the case, it has raised significant doubts about the original investigation and prosecution. As of now, the case of Hae Min Lee remains legally unsolved, though it has taken a dramatic turn with Adnan Syed's release, adding a complex layer to what many had considered a closed case.